people are so focused on trying to be so good at one thing that they eat, sleep, and drink that one thing, to the point where you have to understand it's other things that can actually help or inspire or influence
Mhm.
what you're trying to do. Thank
All right, we're here with Skeme Richards, the Nostalgia King. It's been a while since we've talked, and I'm really glad to have you here and share your wealth of experience and, just a lot of your ways of thinking, your mentality about hip hop, DJing, a lot of different things. And hopefully we can get into all kinds of things. So happy to
you. Yeah,
have you here.
thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's been a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
Congrats on the podcast and doing what you do. I feel like that's so important, to give people stories and just like communication and connect and build with people.
Yeah.
Because like people aren't writing books as much as, because before we had like books, we had radio shows with interviews, and now I feel like the podcast, like it's just so important that things like this are documented. So yeah, I'm honored to be on.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of like why I even wanted to do this, is just to, regardless of whether people listen to it or not, it's just there's a record of it, and people can find it if they want to find it. Yeah, and hopefully lots of people can listen to it.
Well, I mean, and there's so many stories that need to be told. Like, I'm looking at so many artists now who were healthy and all of a sudden passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait, we didn't hear their stories. Like no one interviewed that person yet. That person is a gold mine and a wealth of knowledge and information on history of, like, whether they're an actor or movie director, a DJ, musician. Like there's so many stories that haven't been told because they never got interviewed, or they were healthy and working on doing a documentary on themselves and like passed away. And there's a lot of just people passing away too quick. So definitely important to get stories out and kind of history out about people.
Yeah. And I think it's also a good way to just like connect with people, either just one-on-one connection, but just having other people feel like, hey, they're involved in this conversation, or they're involved in whatever, things that we're talking about, and that kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe to just get started, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, do you mind just doing a little background on just who you are?
Sure. Yeah. Skeme Richards, aka the Nostalgia King, from Philadelphia, PA. Born and raised. I'm a DJ producer. I've been DJing all my life. I started in 1981. I'm a lover of culture, world traveler, DJing, burger connoisseur, ramen connoisseur, beer connoisseur, and just a lover of life and music, art, and culture.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that maybe a lot of people like about you, and why they follow what you do, is you're not just boxing yourself into like, I'm a DJ or I'm a whatever. Like you dabble into all kinds of different things, and I really respect that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where as a kid I just had multiple interests. I had comic books, I had riding BMX bikes, I had, kung fu flicks, I used to take taekwondo classes. It was just so many different, interests. And as an adult, those interests still stuck with me, which is one of the reasons why I feel like it's still keeping me like very youthful,
Mm-hmm.
And that youthful spirit. And, it's just who I am, and, what's kept me who I am today, like I'm very otaku, so
Yeah.
it's just keeping those things around me to keep me feeling young. And, I'll be 50 this year, in October.
For real?
Yeah. And I feel 18,
Yeah. I can't tell anymore with, I don't know. I feel like just the general, I don't know, human race is like looking younger and younger every decade,
Yeah.
every whatever. Yeah.
I guess that's a thing of, the least amount of stress in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and just like stress is the killer of everyone, you know,
Yeah.
the day-to-day stress of weighing in on you,
Hmm.
that's the killer of everyone. So for
Yeah.
me, like I have no stress in life, or I have very minimal stress in life. And I enjoy life. I enjoy those things. I enjoy music, art, culture, burgers, ramen, beer, and you know, good people, good
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah. 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 It makes sense that you would be into, yeah, like DJing or parties and things like that and just enjoying things. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, one of the things I was just kind of interested in and wanted you to just to get your maybe your personal perspective on it is like just a bit of Philadelphia history, like Philadelphia hip hop history, DJ history, graffiti, whatever. I know it has like deep roots in graffiti, like
Very much, very
yeah,
deep.
yeah. So if you don't mind, whatever
Yeah.
you know, whatever you can share.
Yeah. Well, Philly is considered and has always been considered the second city of hip hop. Being an hour and a half away from New York, a lot of what was going on in New York was going on in Philly at the same time.
Hmm.
You know, we had family back and forth, traveling back and forth to New York to Philly for, you know, different occasions, summertime or holidays, or, you know, just to go to parties. I remember driving in the late 80s, early 90s, just driving to New York 3 times a week to go to parties, you know. So Philly is considered the second city of hip hop. Um, but it is the actual first city of graffiti. It's the home of graffiti, you
Mhm.
know, so starting with legendary graffiti artist Cornbread. And you know, cornbread to Philly is what like Cool Herc is to New York as the
Right,
DJ side of things,
right.
right? So Philly has always been doing the hip hop thing before it was called hip hop, right? So uh we had Cornbread as a graffiti writer. We didn't really know who Cool Herc was in Philly, or we had our own version of Cool Herc, which was a guy named Captain Boogie, and Captain Boogie was the guy who would bring the sound systems out into the park. So that was, you know, our version of what that, because we always
Mhm,
had DJs as well.
mhm,
So you know, hip hop has always been here. It's always been graffiti, DJing. Of course, MCing started in New York, you know, but like I said, we were traveling to New York. New York was traveling here, so we was getting that firsthand.
mhm.
Um, and then of course, b-boying started in New York and trickled down to Philly. We had our own dance. It was similar to b-boying. It was similar to top rocking. It was called
Mhm.
stepping, and
Mm.
it was more so top rock. And you would hit the floor, but you wouldn't really stay on the floor. It was
Right.
more so like, you know, it was more up top, but you would hit the floor every once in a while, and then you would come back up. Um, you know, and then just musically, Philadelphia International Records, we made disco extravagant. We made disco music with Gamble and Huff, legendary producers Gamble and Huff, who owned Philadelphia International Records. We made disco more so like soulful is what we brought to disco. We made it soulful,
Hmm.
and that's because Philly was a very soulful city. You know, it was a very soulful black city. So yeah, it's Philly has just so many roots in music and culture. And then once we get back to hip hop and we start talking about DJing,
Mhm.
legendary DJs. I mean, we created a transformer scratch. We're the reason why DJs turn the turntables to the side. You know, all of those things started in Philly. You
Mhm.
know, so yeah, it's just growing up in Philly it was an amazing thing, and just seeing so much of the beginnings of everything starting. You
Mhm.
know, it was an amazing time. That 70s, 80s, you know, going well into the 90s was just an amazing time.
Right on. Yeah. And how's the scene now these days? Like, what's going on now?
I feel like the scene these days, in general, in America,
Mhm.
is not what it once was. It's changed. Um, just
And
because
when you say scene, is this like DJ scene, hip hop scene?
I'm
Like,
gonna connect them all. Like,
okay.
you know, with the DJ scene will always be the DJ scene. You know, you'll always have hip hop parties, funk soul nights, disco nights. Um, in America, our in Philly, our disco nights are amazing. Our funk soul nights aren't as amazing as they should be, considering this is a very black city, a very
Mm.
cultural city. Our b-boy scene is actually like rising again, you know, because
Yeah.
for a while it was on a decline, and now it's rising again. But I feel like that's coming with breaking becoming so commercial now and so popular in Olympics, and it's just becoming more like people trying to focus on it more and more because it's becoming more of a business aspect. So that's on the rise, you know. But Philly always still had raw underground b-boys that never cared about, you know,
Right.
that, you know, it was, let's go to the jam, let's smoke these cats, and that's it. You know, we still have that rawness where they don't care about traveling. They're just trying to smoke anybody that comes to Philly and anybody that's leaving Philly, they're smoking, you know, which is, I respect that. You
Yeah.
know, the graffiti scene will always be hardcore in Philly. It will be always hardcore because you still got guys who are 60 years old that was out bombing when I was a kid, still going out every once in a while, and then you'll see their tag somewhere and you'll be like, oh man, dude's still getting up, you
Damn.
know. So that's it's amazing, you know.
Who
But
are some of the people, like the graffiti names?
so like as far as the writers, like some of the legendary guys is like SN, RX, um Bam, um who else? Who else is still tagging? JP, which is a dude who's writing Jap. Like he would write Jap, would be short, and then his whole tag was Japan, and it would be Jap, and then he it was abbreviated for Just a Pimp, and that was like his like he's a dude. You know, there's so many guys that
Right.
are still like old guys that were still killing it. You know, it's just Philly is so hardcore when it comes to the graph. You know, so yeah, it's a beautiful city, but like a lot of America, I feel like it's being plagued with things becoming too popular and commercialized, and you know, a lot of people aren't really doing culture for culture's sake. It's becoming more so like, how can I be famous
Right.
doing something,
Right.
versus, you know, when I started DJing at 11, it was just because like the older guys was doing it, and I was like, oh, I want to do that. You know, it wasn't about money. It was just about doing this. And I never wanted to be a professional DJ. That was never my thing. Like I worked a day job since 1990, right? And I started working for BMW in 2002. And the whole time, you know, I'm DJing, I'm making beats, I'm involved in hip hop. And 2012, the company was being sold to a corporate company because it used to be family owned. And in 2012, my manager said, hey, you know, when the new owners come in, I can't just let you fly around the world and just go whenever you want to go. You either have to be here or I can lay you off from work. And this was March. I had already had a tour set up in Japan for a month in April, trying to figure out how was I going to go on tour still working. So I was like, oh, I guess I can't be here. You know, you'll just have to lay me off from work. And it was the best thing I ever did in life because I had already had gigs booked from April to October. So that was like the best thing that could ever happen. So I never wanted to become a professional DJ. I did it. I was professional, but I always had a day job.
Yeah.
But it just worked out.
Yeah.
You know, it worked out.
I think it was you. I just remember maybe it was like a status update or whatever, this kind of thing, some social media thing. And you were just kind of talking about this sort of thing. Like, you know, you're a DJ, but like you don't need this. You don't need this as like, it's not your job, you know, you have something else. You can leave it behind and go do something else and you'll be fine. Like,
Yeah. That was
yeah.
actually my stats. Like, because my thing is, I talk to so many DJs and they're like, I'm never getting a day job. I'm never getting, yeah, no one wants a day job. But if DJing ended today and I had to go back and get a day job, not a problem.
Yeah.
I'll go back and get a day job. You know, because DJing and hip hop didn't buy me a house. Going to work every day bought me a house. Now DJing just maintains my house. right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so I have no attachment. If I have to go back and get a day job to sustain my house because DJing is not working, I have no problem going back because I'm still going to always do music every day,
right, yeah,
you know?
yeah. And that's like, I don't know, that's like the pure thing. You're just doing it because you want to do it. You know, it's not tied to any paycheck. It's nice that you do get that sometimes, but that's like, to me, that's really like really doing it for the love, you know?
It's for the love.
Yeah,
It's for the love. And sometimes that term for the love
yeah, yeah,
it's used the wrong way, you
yeah,
know, because people want you to work for free
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. It's like it's not about working for free, you know. It's about like understanding that like I don't have this attachment and I
Mhm.
really love what I do. Yes, I want to make a living from it, but if I'm not making a living from it, I'm still going to do it every day. You know, and some people don't understand that, oh, I'm not making money from it. I'm not, but do you love this? Because if you
Mhm.
love this, then it should be no question about why you're doing it because you
Yeah,
actually love this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, like you said, these days, I don't know, breaking, especially breaking in the recent year or whatever, like it's really started to become this bigger thing and becoming more commercial. And like, I don't know, there's pros and cons to
Hmm.
that kind of thing, but you know, it's like you said, like if the Olympics disappeared, if competitions disappeared, it's like, would you still be doing it? Would you still enjoy dancing? Like, why are you dancing? It's something that me
Yeah.
personally, like I've thought about a lot more, especially as you get older. Maybe it's something that b-boys and b-girls have to deal with maybe sooner because it's like your body starts to kind of deteriorate, right?
Yeah.
You
You
know?
know, and it's
Yeah.
crazy because I always equate breaking to the skateboard scene, right? Both were youth driven
Mm-hmm.
cultures from the 70s. Breaking stopped here, skateboarding skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing competitions, sponsored competitions, underground competitions since the 70s. They went commercial, but still kept grounded. They made their money, but a skater is a skater to the end of time. No matter how much money they make, they're still going to the skate park. They're still waking up in the morning, jumping on their skateboard, riding down the street to get their cup of coffee. Right? So it's competition or no competition, they're still doing it every day. They're still right because it's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I feel a lot of b-boys and b-girls, they didn't get into it for the culture. They got into it because it looked cool and they see a bunch of people involved and then they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they get good at it. But they're not waking up in the morning and going outside and breaking outside. Like it's they're going to the practice spot at night. Like it's just something so different about the skate scene because that's what they really do. They get up and they go skate at the park and then they go get their coffee. You know, it's them. You know, and they made money. The skate scene, there's so much money in the skate world, but they also control their industry. Dancers don't control their industry. You know, someone else controls their industry because a skater can have his own company because he's got a skate brand, he's got a signature skate deck, he's got a signature clothing line. You know, he might be sponsored by a major company, but that major company is really funding money into that person. Right? With breaking, what do b-boys and b-girls have to sell? Nothing. Unless you start a clothing brand,
Mm-hmm.
you really have nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Right? And like skateboarders, like they have a whole industry built around them. You know, skaters still throw skate events. You know, it's so different. It's so different. So I really want to know how this is going to pan out because a lot of people in the breaking world, they're so hoping to become professional at this that if it ends tomorrow and the Olympics stops and they have to just go back to doing underground jams, a lot of people are going to quit.
I think so. Yeah. I think, you know, like you said, it comes down to where are their priorities, you know, that kind of thing. And I don't know, maybe this is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on here is because for me personally, like the times when you have come to Vancouver have been really, and just like if I saw you somewhere else or whatever, like Outbreak or something like that, like me as a developing, I don't know, dancer, hip hop practitioner, whatever you want to call it, like you had a big impact on reminding me that this isn't about just like what's the biggest move that you can do, you reminded me that there's a culture, that there's something bigger than that, that this stuff comes from like parties and connecting with people and music and all this. And I think, you know, you had a big impact on just the Vancouver scene and how it is today. Like I've heard this a lot from other people, that Vancouver scene, maybe it doesn't have the highest level, but as far as a community and people enjoying just like dancing and just, you know, just enjoying the music and letting go. And we don't care about what you look like, what you're doing. If you're doing some spinning, flipping, whatever, we don't care. Like, are you just having fun and letting loose and that kind of thing? And I think just me personally, like you had a big influence on that, on the Vancouver scene. Yeah.
Well,
Reminding people
culturally,
about that.
culturally, I mean, every time I've gone to Vancouver, it's been an amazing experience. The vibe has been good. The people have been good. The scene's been amazing. And that's what this is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about culture and the
Mm-hmm.
scene and the people that make up the culture and the scene. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and when you have good people around you, it doesn't matter like the talent level. It's like, are you having fun? Do you look like you're vibing? Do you that that energy means so much to me when I'm at a jam or a party, you know, and you just look around a room and you feel the energy. If you can feel something that you can only see, right? Because you can't see energy, you feel the energy.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see the energy in the room,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you just get it. And the scene in Vancouver has always just been like a beautiful scene, and and it's crazy because that doesn't exist everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't exist everywhere because a lot of places are everybody's their own individual things
Mm-hmm.
and they come together because there's a jam. But the Vancouver scene was like, no, we really rock together. Like we enjoy this together,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So yeah, that's amazing. And like I said, not every city has that. You
Yeah.
know, it's weird. You would think so, but once again, I feel like that's also a lot of people don't know the reason why they do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they were in school and then they saw like their boyfriend's girlfriend at a jam or something. It was like, oh, I want to do this. Or they went to college and joined the b-boy club at the
Mm-hmm.
college or
Yeah.
something. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they didn't like, we got into this because of the music. Like, you know, I wanted to DJ because of other DJs or because of the music. And then there's people that actually got into this because, you know, they might have went to a jam and then they heard the music and they were like, yo, what is this? Or they were in the hip hop brought them into samples brought them into making beats, you know, or it was always some sort of journey
Mm-hmm.
into it
Mm-hmm.
versus, you know, you just hung out one day and you saw somebody doing it and you wanted to do it. There's always context to something and always a lineage
Mm-hmm.
of something.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's so important that people have to discover and understand the lineage of a culture.
Yeah. 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 Like that's something that, like, if we're talking about, yeah, like breaking a lot of the stuff that I was taught by people like you, by people like Po One, Kenny, like all these different people, is like this stuff comes from parties, and it comes from like, there's the competitive aspect to it, but it comes from like a party atmosphere of people just having fun and like just doing crazy stuff because they just wanted to, not because it was going to necessarily impress anybody or whatever, but like just because the music made them want to do that. Or, you know, and I think about like just on a human level, like that's kind of what a lot of people want to do, is they want to connect with other people, they want to share in this experience together. And like I see it in all kinds of things. Like I don't know if you're a big pro wrestling fan, but I love pro wrestling. And like during the pandemic era, there was no fans, and like it was just different. And now they're starting to come back, and you can feel it. And like, to me at least, it makes it so much more enjoyable to have this crowd of people that are like chanting stuff. It's very free flowing, and there's just saying things, and the wrestlers are interacting with the crowd, and the crowd's interacting with the wrestlers, or like, you know, like games and stuff like that, like fighting game tournaments. I'm into like Street Fighter and stuff like that. The best part of those events is the crowd and the stories that are happening, and connecting with the players and connecting with the journey that they've been through and that kind of thing.
And see, and that's my point. The crowd,
Yeah.
audience, the connection to the people. And those are two prime examples: pro wrestling and the video game competition circuit world. Those are both prime examples, because you need an audience.
Yeah.
Right? You need that audience, because the energy of that audience is the same as a DJ. I need that audience. You know, during the pandemic, I didn't go on Twitch and Instagram to DJ, because I don't want to DJ in my home virtually for people.
Yeah.
I'd rather do a mix, and you can listen to it when you want to listen to it. I need to be in a room with the people to feel the energy of the people in the room.
Yeah. I want to get your opinion on this. Like, I was trying to think of how to formulate this thought. But one of the things that I've thought about a lot recently with, we'll just say breaking in particular, but it can apply to a lot of different things, is this idea of, yeah, like community and people wanting to share in this thing together. But to get people to like share in this thing, or build an audience, that kind of thing, like you need people to have sort of a baseline understanding of what they're even watching, right? And I feel like sometimes breaking, or just dance in general, has like become this thing that, like, if you're a dancer, you're like you're a b-boy, or you're a b-girl, or you're a ballet dancer, you're a house dancer. You can't just be someone who dances, who enjoys moving and that kind of thing. Like, it's been elevated to this level where like the everyday people have no connection with it, whereas something with music is like, it never got to this point. Well, maybe some genres or whatever, but like in general, it's just kind of like, does this sound good? Does it make you, are you enjoying it? Okay, you can enjoy this music. Like, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, so like there's a guy in Philly who I didn't even know who he was, but he would pop up at parties, older gentleman. He would pop up at parties with roller skates on, and he would be in the party like really grooving on skates, and not even skating around. He would just be in a spot dancing with skates, and I'd be like, and his name is Master J. Like, that's what you're talking about. Like, that guy who just comes in, he's enjoying. He's not a b-boy, he's not a house dancer, but he can house dance. He can boogie. He, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he can do these things, and you just feel the energy, right? But with, like you said, with b-boys and house dancers, and it's like, oh, you're a ballet dancer, you're a so-and-so dancer, like, versus, yo, I'm just grooving, I'm a dancer. I'm like, I go to the parties. It's, everything has become a showcase right now.
Yeah.
Right. Versus just like, I'm in a party and I'm vibing right now. This music is amazing. This DJ is amazing. The people in the room are amazing. And I'm just vibing. That's what I miss, you know, and you still get that, like in the funk soul scenes, you still get that. Because there's people that's coming in because they want that music, and they're going to have a beer, and they're going to dance, and they're going to dance from 10 at night to 5 in the morning, because that's what they do. And yes, they're doing Northern Soul dances. They're doing, like, you know, they're doing dances, but they're not specialized dancers. They're coming in, and they're just coming in to enjoy the music and dance. You know, and once things became so like showcasing and highlighting what type of dancer you are, I think it lost some of its element, because now it's just like, yeah, you're a one-trick pony. That's what you do. right? Versus like, yo, just come into the party and just groove. If you want to break, go ahead, throw down. If you want to top, go ahead. Like, but be one with the music, be one with the energy in the room. You know, that's so important. You know, and like you said, it's just too much focus has been placed on certain things versus, you know, the reason why you're in this room is because of this music. You know, and it's the same way with when I hear a band, when I hear a live band, like, you know, Root Soul in Tokyo, you know, just different bands, QASB and from Tokyo. Like when I see these bands perform, I'm like, yo, they're killing it. Like, you know, they're rocking the drums and the singer's always on point. When I see these people, I'm like, see, you're feeling this. You're feeling this funk soul because I hear it in your music. I hear your soul in your music when you're playing it. You know, and that's so it's all about that foundation of where did this come from. You know, that's so important. You can tell who really understands it and who's just duplicating it.
Right. Yeah.
You can tell, you know, there's a difference, and you can duplicate it so well, but I can see in your emotions and your feelings that you're not really understanding. It's like you're not really feeling it. You just copied it really well. You know, and it's the same way with dancers. When I see someone who's top rocking and I'm like, oh man, yeah, this person feels the soul. He's not just going through motions, he's feeling the soul, you know. And I love, like, Anija is one person that I always, when I go to Japan, when Anija tops it, when he breaks, I'm like, he's feeling, he's not doing a bunch of moves, he's feeling it. And then you look and you're like, oh, and you DJ too? Like, you feel the connection between the music and the culture and the dance. You feel his rhythm, you feel what he's doing, and you're like, okay, yeah, he's got soul.
Yeah. Do you think, I think you've mentioned this in the past, and like other people have mentioned this too, but just when it comes to, say, for example, like hip hop, back in the day, it wasn't just like you were a dancer, or you were a graffiti writer, or you were a MC. It's kind of like people dabbled in all kinds of things, and even if they weren't maybe that great, they still had like a dip the toe in there and dip, you know, that kind of thing. And do you think, does that still exist? Are people still dabbling, or
not on the same scale that it once was? There are still people who are dabbling, but it's just not on the same scale as what it once was, because people are so focused on trying to be so good at one thing that they eat, sleep, and drink that one thing, to the point where you have to understand it's other things that can actually help or inspire or influence what you're trying to do. And case in point, if you look at breaking, everybody was a writer some way in the 70s, 80s. Like all kids, you broke, you know, you were a DJ, but you also had a tag, right? You also could write. But when you look at the foundation of breaking, you're like, yeah, those guys, they were obviously watching kung fu flicks, because kung fu flicks are very prevalent in their moves, right? So their inspirations was karate flicks, kung fu flicks. So they watched these on Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons. That was inspiration. So the same way they move is the same way you could see how someone has a tag and they're tagging, because you see the flow and how they're writing their tags in their dance, right? All of those things inspire. Oh, he's DJing now. Well, he should be able to DJ, because look, he knows his music. He has rhythm. That's the next logical step, is to DJ or make beats or produce or whatever. It's the next logical step. You know, like I DJ, and I've said this multiple times. When I DJ, I used to look at Why Not and be like, I want to DJ like Why Not breaks, because the way he breaks is so like fluent that I'm like, yo, I need to play these funk soul records like how he breaks. Right. And it's those inspirations. Those are things that's supposed to inspire what you do. You know, every time I go to Japan, I come back super excited and super inspired because some of my favorite DJs are from Japan. The vibe is good. The people are good. When I go to the parties, I'm like, this is how Black parties in America used to be. When I go to Japan, I'm like, see how they're rocking to the music, and they get it and they understand it and they know the music and the DJs know the music, the crowd knows the music. I'm like, this is what it used to be here in the States on that level. You know, so like, yeah, you're supposed to dabble in different things to inspire your full creativity. And you don't have to be the best at those things, but things are supposed to inspire what you do. You know, if you're a photographer, what's inspiring you? You're supposed to go out and you're like, oh man, that's a really beautiful door. Let me take a picture of this door because the door is beautiful. That's your inspiration. Oh, look at this flower. Look at this crack in the wall. I see this differently. Let me take a photo of this. Things are supposed to inspire. You know, if you're doing photography, the next logical step should be videography. And like, oh, I need to shoot a documentary because I already know my subject and how to shoot my subject. Let me film my subject. So yeah, but that also comes back with knowing the foundations of things and just really being like, okay, I get it. You know, so yeah.
So speaking of dabbling, there's another thing that I really wanted to talk to you about is and you kind of mentioned it earlier on, that you yourself, you got your hands into all kinds of different things that are not even necessarily directly related to DJing or hip hop or anything like that. Although there's always connections everywhere. But what were the so what are the things that you've got your hands into these days?
So DJing wise, I'm putting out like these 45s, these edit 45s are like rare records that I'm like digging for and doing edits. I'm actually trying to do a book right now, a Nostalgia King book of just all my collection of toys, my collection of just vintage items, you know, vintage movie posters like kung fu posters, blaxploitation. So I'm working on a book now of just like my collection, you know, and like that's important to me because once again, it's a part of who I am. It's a part of my image. Just one of the things that people know me for, you know. So I'm connecting the dots on that right there. And I still, for a while, I was shooting like a burger series. I've got like 5 episodes of a burger series where I'm actually like, you know, at restaurants and talking about burgers and, you know, so working on that's a time consuming thing, you know, trying to do any like a 15-minute show of like a burger conversation. It's like, it's difficult. So been trying to do that. But then I also just want to connect it now into a ramen series. Like there's so many things that I'm working on and trying to do and trying to put the pieces together and get somebody to film it and do all these things. So yeah, there's a lot of things. It all comes back to music, art, culture, and lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, just things that I'm in. It all comes back to those things. And you know, if time was not a thing, and if money was not a thing, oh, I would have these things done, you know, in no time. It would be like I would eat, sleep, and drink what I'm doing.
Yeah.
You know. So, but time and money are always the 2 factors that come into play where it's like, I got to do this today, so I can't do that today. And, you know, but I'm young, you know, I've got time. I'm going to all pull it together. But like, I think the next project that I'm really focusing on is the Nostalgia King book. And it's funny because to backtrack a little bit, last year, time has just escaped me. Last year. Yeah. So last year was supposed to be the 10-year anniversary of my Magmatashi Returns to Japan tour.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it would have been cherry blossom season. It would have been sort of been March, April last year. And I was doing Magmatashi Returns 10-year anniversary book for the Japan tour. And it would have just been all photos of all of the parties, all the people, the food, the sights. So since we couldn't do it last year, and I started working on a book, but then I realized it wasn't going to happen. So I kind of stopped working on the book.
Mhm.
And then I thought we were going to happen this year. And I was like, okay, I can still do the book. And then of course, pandemic's still rolling. So I couldn't, no Japan travel in March, April.
Mhm.
And so I'm hoping next year things will be perfect and I could do the book. So that's a big thing, because I want to show the people of Japan, like, yo, I really appreciated these 10 years of consistent tours,
Mhm.
doing these parties, and do
Mhm.
this book,
Mhm.
just this memory log of like amazing people and amazing sights and amazing foods, so that's really what I need to focus on, is getting that, because when the doors open, I do want to just be able to just run to Japan and just, you know, make it happen. So
Yeah.
hopefully my goal, really, to spend my 50th birthday in Japan in October. So I'm hoping the doors will be open, but I don't know. It seems so soon, right?
Yeah, we'll see. Japan's their way of dealing with the pandemic is, I don't know.
It's, yeah,
It'll,
I've heard, I've been staying up on it. I've
yeah,
been
yeah.
staying up on it, and yeah, even like with the Olympics, and at first I thought, okay, you're keeping the borders closed just because the Olympics here, and you don't want the flood of people, and
Mhm.
hopefully after the Olympics is done, you'll be like, okay, cool. Now we won't have that influx of people trying to come in. But like the stories I'm hearing, I'm like, yeah, it's not being dealt with properly, like just the vaccinations and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's
So
we were kind of talking a little bit about this, like when you live here, I don't know if this how much this plays into it, but Japan like has a bit of an issue with like agility and being able to
yeah,
like, there's a big issue that something needs to radically change, and they not so great, not so quick with adapting,
right.
and a lot of bureaucracy and things like that.
Yeah.
But no place is perfect, right?
No place, and that's the thing. No place is perfect, and every situation is different. Because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
looked at a lot of countries. A lot of countries didn't deal with the pandemic
yeah.
in proper fashion.
Hmm.
Whether it was resources, whether it was manpower,
Hmm.
finances, whatever. A lot of countries didn't deal. Look at Italy. The first place to really get hit was Italy.
Hmm.
And Milan, and they're still dealing with it. They still haven't like vaccinated their people, and they
Hmm.
were the first place to really get hit with it,
Hmm.
in Europe. So like it's yeah. I mean, for me, I miss Japan so much
Hmm.
that I'm just like, oh man, I didn't go in 2020. There's a chance I might not go in 2021. Like, is it going to be 3 years before I go? Either it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I was actually supposed to be in Japan when the pandemic was kicking off. My tour was scheduled mid-March, and I still had my flights. I didn't cancel anything,
Mm.
and I still had my flights. And one by one, my first date was like late March, and one by one, my gigs started canceling. And I was like, I guess this is the sign I'm not going to Japan.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So yeah.
Yeah. I think everyone's in a very similar boat of just kind of like waiting for this thing to at least get to some point where it's manageable and things can have some sense of quote unquote
Right.
normalness. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So just kind of coming back to a bit of like your collecting and this kind of thing, I was just kind of curious, like how did you get into that kind of just collecting in general?
Um, it's something that I always did. It
Hmm.
was like, as a kid, I never threw away anything. I just always kept like
Hmm.
toys and whatever. I never threw away. My parents never threw anything away, and I just always had. And it was always something that, if I got my turntables and everything set up, there might be that one toy that's sitting up there that I had as a kid.
Hmm.
So I never really set out to be a collector. It was just something I amassed, a collection of things. And then when I became focused and concentrated on like, oh man, I got a collection of things, I started connecting the dots and be like, what did I have that I don't have anymore?
Yeah.
You know, what what don't I have that I really wanted back as a kid or teen years and I didn't have, so let me go buy it now because I have the resources to buy it now.
Yeah.
It was just something I've always been this person of collecting, because as a DJ, that's what we are. We collect records, you know. And so collecting things started with comic books as a kid in the 70s, you know. So I think the first collecting thing was probably comic books, you know, because I always had toys, but comic books was what I was going to go buy on Saturday mornings. So that's what became the collection, you know. So I'd say the comic book thing is what started the whole collecting thing, you know. And it's just here we are, fast forward, and it's like, oh, I have a collection of all of the things that I enjoyed as a youth that keep me youthful to this day, you know. From like all of the kung fu movie posters. Like I didn't have the movie posters as a kid, but I saw all those movies, you know, whether on TV or whether in the theater. And now it's like, okay, now I can find those movie posters. I know collectors. I know, you know, people who are sitting on warehouse full of posters. So it's now I can be like, oh, let me go and see this guy and buy what I need to buy to add to the collection. So yeah, it's just something, you know, it's just something that's always been me. And you know, people are like, oh, how did you get this? And the crazy thing is, everything that I own, I bought before the collector madness of everybody being like, I want to collect, and now prices are skyrocketing through the roof. You know, everything. Everything is just is skyrocket through the roof. And I'm like, you know what? This is what happens when you're really into something before everyone else is into something, because it's a part of who you are, while everyone is paying like top dollar for everything that you bought for pennies, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, I've always been that way. Same thing with sneakers, like how sneaker collecting is like so big, and like, you know, people are spending all this money on sneakers. But I'm like, for me as a kid, or for me growing up, I'm like, sneakers and fresh sneakers, that was just like street culture. That was, we wanted fresh sneakers. That's what we did, you know.
It wasn't a thing, right?
It wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
You know. And then I started seeing, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they started doing sneakerology 101 classes in colleges. And I'm like, why? Like, someone's getting paid to do a sneakerology 101 class to tell these students about sneakers. Like, sneakers is just something that we did, and we wore fresh in the hood. Like, that's what it was. You know, that's all it was. So like, I don't look at like the whole sneaker collector. I'm like, whatever. Like, most of them are ugly sneakers anyway.
Yeah.
You know, but because you're limited, it wasn't about that. It was about wearing fresh sneakers. You know, so it's just so weird how everything becomes pop culture and then blows up, and then the masses gets hip to it, and then now they want to start collecting it, and it drives the prices up on things that they weren't even into before. So it's really weird. But that's why I love Japan so much, because there's very otaku.
Yeah.
You know,
people get really into stuff.
And I love that about the Japanese, because if they're into one thing, they're into that thing.
Yeah.
They do it really well. It's funny because DJ T told me years ago, he said, he was like, Skeme, he's like, you collect everything. He's like, man, but you know, here, if someone collects paper clips, they have the ultimate paper clip collection. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, that's true. That's true.
There was a guy, because like there's some TV show where they have kind of like, they feature an otaku about some certain thing, and like one guy was an instant ramen like connoisseur, and he was like, he has this whole collection of like all the different wrappers for different, like, I don't know, going back decades and decades and decades. And like this guy, I think, even has his own shop now that he opened up. That's like a instant ramen specialty shop.
See, but that only happens in Japan. That's why I love Japan, because the Japanese will take their passion of a collection and then open up a store or write a book or a magazine. Yeah, that only happens in Japan. No one else does that. Like, there's not, like in America, someone, I mean, on that level, like someone will be a sneaker collector and then they'll do a sneaker book because someone funded your sneaker book, you know. But it's more so out of money. You're trying to make money. But in Japan, it's like, Yeah, I have a collection, especially with records, like the record bars in Japan, or like I know so many people have opened up stores that house their collection just because they can't house it at home.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
There's a
that's
lot
a
of those.
lot. It's a lot of people. It's like, you know what? I'm going to open up a business because I have too much of this stuff and I can't store it at home. So why
Mhm.
not open up a business? It might not, the business might not even be connected to the collection, but their collection will be in the store.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the decor of the store.
yeah. A lot of times they're just bars because that's just, part of the culture. Everyone likes
Exactly.
drinking or it's part of the whatever. And yeah, you'll see that a lot in a lot of the Japanese bars, izakayas, whatever, or even kind of like not necessarily bars, but like, yeah, like
Yeah.
music bars kind of thing.
Music bars. Yeah, the music
Mhm.
bars.
You'll see
There-
all kinds of collections.
yeah, there's one guy in Tokyo who runs who has a music bar called JBS. It's in
Oh, I've
Shibuya.
been there.
JBS,
I think
yeah.
it's the same one. Yeah.
Kobayashi-san, Mr. Kobayashi-san.
Mm.
Like his record collection of 90s hip hop, jazz, and blues, ridiculous.
Mm.
Like ridiculous. I don't know how big his house is, but like I'm sure he can't house all those records
Yeah.
in his house. So you have a music bar.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you connect these things, and it's once again, like I said, that connection. You know, you took your passion of music and was like, oh, I got to store this somewhere. I'll open up a bar, and I love
Mhm.
that about Japan. That's if I could move to Japan and do those same things, I would do that.
You probably can. I
I,
think the hard part would just be like, okay, how do you end up? How do you stay in Japan like
I
long term?
know, right? That's
Yeah.
the hard part. How do I
Yeah.
stay there?
Yeah.
You know, so
But
I mean,
yeah,
I would love that. Like, I would have to get somebody to sponsor me and be like, hey, you know,
it can
Skeme
happen.
needs here.
Yeah. But like just going back to Japan, like that's one of the things that when I moved here and I got to know the culture a little deeper, like I'm kind of like you. I like to dabble. I'm interested in a lot of different things, but for me personally, like the issue with that was like I never went really deep into any one thing. It was just kind of like, yeah, kind of all over the place, and it's cool because you get to see the connections and things like that between the different things. But when I moved to Japan, that was one thing that really, I don't know, had a big impact on me, that you saw people that got so deep into this one thing, like you said, collecting paper clips, or like, they collect like shoelaces, or I don't know, whatever it is, like
Yeah,
some random thing. And but they just get into really into, or like, people who still make like samurai swords, but they're like, there's
yeah,
like long lineage, and maybe there's like only I don't know, 10 people who do it in the country or something like that, but like they, even though it's completely irrelevant now,
yep,
like they're still into it and they're still like 100% dedicated to it or whatever.
yeah. There was a documentary I saw a few years back on like the last sword makers.
Right.
Like there was a document, I forgot what it was called, but like this guy, he was making the Kyoto sword. I think it was a
Mhm.
Kyoto sword,
Mhm.
and he was like the last of the original guys, and he had an apprentice who was a young guy who he was really trying to train to make this sword properly. Like so, like that's a prime example. Like
Mhm.
carrying on that lineage
Mhm.
of something that's totally irrelevant now,
Mhm.
but they're so deep into it and living that, eat, sleeping, and drinking that,
Mhm.
that they become master sword makers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So crazy, but that's that passion that the Japanese have
Yeah.
for something.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like in China with like the neon sign makers.
Right.
Like that's a dying thing. They're not doing the neon
Mhm.
signs like they were doing in the 60s, 70s,
Mhm.
like the with the blow up glasses. Like they're not doing that anymore. Now everything is
Mhm.
kind of like generic, like uh signs or whatever, or like
Mhm.
fluorescent signs.
Right. Right.
But before it was the like the neon
Mhm.
signs. Like that's and there's a documentary on that as well, that I saw recently about like the last guys that are making the neon signs. Like it's so crazy. Like those crafts, there's still a love for it, but there's not many people practicing it to still create it, you know.
Yeah. And like we were talking a little bit about this, but just Japan's like slow to change kind of things or adopt new things. And that's one thing that I thought about too, that is a kind of a big contrast with, in particular, say like North America and maybe especially America, that America is you have like a kind of conservative thinking in Japan where it's slow to change, well, this is working, just keep doing this kind of thing. And we don't change it unless we really need to. Whereas America is like kind of the polar opposite, where it's like, what's the new thing? Let's innovate. Let's do this. Let's try this. Let's put these things together. What happens? Like all these kind of crazy things, and like, pros and cons to everything there. Like you find all these new things if you innovate and all this stuff. But, and again, this is something that I kind of realized that is missing, maybe from my experience with Vancouver. They're always like tearing down houses. There's no history in Vancouver with like houses, and this is a particular aesthetic of this neighborhood or whatever. Whereas Japan is like, they'll just keep building. There's a strong sense of like tradition. Sometimes it's to a fault, but like, I think there's a healthy amount that you can have of like respecting the tradition and not necessarily being so focused on what's the next thing, what's the new thing. It's like, this is good, let's keep doing this, that kind of thing.
But I feel the same way. It's the gift and the curse, but I feel the same way, where the slow to adapting to things, it's like, yeah, if it works, let's just keep running with it, because people are still working, you're still keeping jobs, and there's still that money flowing. Like, I feel when you're trying to innovate so much, people lose jobs because now you're bringing technology into things. And it's like, oh, we don't have to hire this many people because we've innovated so much that it kind of runs with 10 people instead of 10,000 people. And, and so I applaud Japan on that, with trying to uphold tradition, because like you said, like Vancouver, they're knocking down buildings to put up new condos and stuff like that. And it's the same in Philly. Like, there's still the traditional homes, there's still, but I see like as things are falling down, they're just building something that looks totally the opposite of what it should. Like, if there's a neighborhood that looks a certain way, they're coming in and they're building something that looks like leftover materials from Europe, like that they discarded and didn't want, like the architecture. So they like sent this metal and steel and like, hey, we'll make something out of this, so there's no connection. So yeah, it's the gift and the curse. So I applaud Japan in wanting to keep traditions, but then there's certain times you have to realize, like, okay, yeah, there's a better way of doing this, and if we do it this way, that's not going to die, but this is just making things a little bit easier and producing it quicker or better or whatever, but Japanese are still always like hands-on with things. Like, that's why you still have people that's creating swords, you have people that's creating certain things that are just so irrelevant, because the Japanese are very hands-on people, and I applaud that. But like you said, there's some things that just need to change to get up to 2021.
It's all this, like, I guess, delicate balancing act of how much change do you put in. Like, I don't know, I always think of this like from a sort of evolutionary standpoint. Like, if there's no reason to change, you don't have to change, right? You just stay the course, right? But in the event that you have something like, say, a pandemic, if you've been innovating and trying different things, then, and you give yourself or your country or your culture or whatever different avenues to survive, which one is adaptable, and that'll be the one that, okay, well, that's the way that works, so let's change to that kind of thing. Like, that's where I think that's like a human thing, is to want to innovate, but it's just like, how much do you do it? And
that's, I mean, when you think about it, look at Japan's infrastructure as far as public transportation. Look at the bullet train, the Shinkansen. Look like That's very Japanese. That's something that America hasn't been able to innovate on.
Yeah.
You know,
where's our
like,
Hyperloop? I'm still waiting on the
yeah,
Hyperloop.
yeah, you know, like I don't even trust Americans to build a bullet train.
Mm.
I don't even trust it. I don't want to go that fast with anyone American driving. Like, no, I don't trust it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like we can't even not crash on a normal train every once in a while. Like, I don't want to go that fast.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think part of that too is coming back to that that commitment to what you're doing. Like, if you spend any time in Japan, like, and you ride the trains and stuff, not even bullet trains, but just the regular trains, like you'll see a lot of times, like there's a lot of like ritual, I guess is what you could call it. Like the conductor, the driver or whatever, like when he's pulling out of the state, I don't know, maybe it depends on the driver and depends on the line or whatever, but I've seen drivers when they're pulling out of the station and they have this very specific motion that they do, and they probably don't even need, doesn't even look like they're doing it to anyone, but they have to do it. It's a tradition. And like,
I love that.
Yeah,
I love
cool.
that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you're on the train, when you're on the Shinkansen, and the food cart is coming down, and you know they bow before they go through the door.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's tradition.
Yeah.
I always tell people, Japan is the last place with culture and tradition. And people are always like, what are you talking about? They're the last place with culture and tradition. I'm like, I can still walk around Tokyo and there's still sumo wrestlers walking around, or riding bikes, right? There's still some town out there with ninja.
Yeah.
Right? There's still sword makers.
And geisha are still a thing
and geisha is still a thing.
Kyoto and a few other places. Yeah.
Yes. Right. And you have, then if you take it a step further, you look at the lowrider scene, and there's still like lowriders and cholos in Japan. Right.
Yeah.
The punk scene is still very major in Japan. Right. So all these American things that we don't even really do at that high level anymore, the Japanese are still doing it on that high level. So the Japanese are the last people with culture and love of culture, of their own culture and everyone else's culture, and they do everyone else's culture just as good, if not better.
Yeah, I think kind of part of it is that idea of just getting into something and, okay, I guess this is what I do kind of thing, versus the more kind of Western mentality of like, all right, well, I'm bored with this, and like the fad's over, I guess I'll move on to something else.
Exactly.
And,
and that's what separates collectors from real collectors. People that dabble in collecting versus people that like, yo, I do this.
Yeah.
This is what I do because I can pull out a multitude of things. It's like conversation. Is your like a b-boy usually has a conversation on breaking, but can you talk about anything else? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I look at collecting. Like, yeah, you might collect baseball cards, but I don't. But I know collecting, so I can relate to you on collecting of baseball cards.
Right.
It's that connection. And collecting is a conversation piece. You know, the same way you said you dabble into this and this, like you can have a conversation with 10 different people on 10 different things because you dabble into 10 different things. That's knowing, and that's having that foundation of like, just everything inspires what I do. So I'm into these 10 things and inspires what I do. So I can hold 10 conversations on this thing. I can write one book off of these 10 things that I'm into, you know, versus I'm only into one thing. And then that kind of gets boring after a while. You're into one thing, unless you're a serious collector of like, you're Japanese and you're just like, I collect paper clips, or the instant ramen label guy. Like,
but I think too, like the more I think about it, like people will get really into something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they only do that. They're just like dedicated. They commit to something. And it's like, I might enjoy, I don't know, like jazz music and this kind of whatever, rock
Yep.
music and playing games or going to whatever, drinking tea. But then like I've committed to collecting these paper clips and like
Yeah.
I'm gonna see it through. That
And
kind
that's
of
the
thing.
thing, that dedication of seeing it through.
Hmm.
I need everything of that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to find everything if it's the last thing I do.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the thrill is always in the hunt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thrill. The thrill's
Yeah.
like I've looked at so much stuff now that I was looking for. And now there's certain things that I'm like, oh, I can easily get it. Now I don't even chase it down because I'm like, I can easily get it now.
Mm.
You know, so the thrill is always in the hunt. The thrill is I can't find it, so I'm going to hunt for it. And then once I get it, I'm happy. But if I start seeing certain things, I'm like, oh, there's 10 of them out there now. Oh, I can get them when I want to get it now. It's not, the thrill isn't there anymore because it's there. Right. I get it when I want to get it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I got another collector friend, and he's kind of like, I got into a little bit of collecting, not serious collecting, but I started like, there was these like Nintendo figures that they started releasing, and I was like, started buying them because I just like Nintendo, right?
Right.
And he was like, yeah, you're getting into it, you're becoming a collector, and like, don't you feel that, don't you get that feeling of like you started the series and now you got to see it through, you got to get them all kind of thing, like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I feel it, but you know, my personality doesn't match well with collecting. Like, I'm a more minimal kind of person. I don't like a lot of stuff and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why I gave up. Like, maybe sometime down the road I'll get back into those specific ones.
Right. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like you said, you're a minimalist.
Yeah.
Right. And you like certain things, but you don't need to have an abundance of those things. And that makes so, because sometimes I'm like, oh man, I got too much stuff. But when I go to organize and straighten up my area, I'm like, man, but it looks good displayed.
Yeah. Well, that it brings value. You see value in it. It adds something to your life, right?
Right. And I see a lot of people that collect and they're all in boxes and they're put away. And I'm like, that's not fun. Like if they're not out on display somehow, then what's the point in collecting? Just to throw it in a box somewhere and be like, oh, I'll look at it every once in a while. Like, no, like,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, a side note. So speaking of collecting, there's a book a friend of mine did. His name is Matt Alt. He actually lives in Japan.
Oh, really?
And it's called Pure Invention: How Japan's Pop Culture Conquered the World. The book just came out like a year ago.
Damn.
Nice hardback book. Yeah, he it tells a lot of great stories on like how Japan's pop culture changed the world. I mean, everything from like how during the war, how a lot of toys were tin toys because the soldiers and the American soldiers like Coca-Cola cans, and then after the war it was like they just have an abundance of soda cans. What do you do with it? So that spawned the whole tin toy thing, tin robots, which now that stuff like tin robots are like thousands of dollars, like vintage 1960s, 70s, like tin wind-up robots. A lot of that stuff's so expensive, but it tells stories like that about how that became a thing, you know, and it connects the dots to like, you know, early boom boxes that were made in Japan, you know, Hello Kitty, how Hello Kitty changed the world.
Yeah.
You know, all those things. So it's an amazing book of just like stories, and it talks to like the inventors of a lot of people, and it's just an amazing book. So yeah, like the Japanese definitely hold it down. You know?
Yeah.
They hold it down.
Yeah. I think maybe that's a good kind of final note to end this on, not end it on, but kind of like wrap it up is you know, like history and getting into the history, finding the lineage, it's kind of coming back to what we were talking about. But like, if you're gonna get into something, you got to really get into it, you know, and you can't go on that surface level. You got to start looking into like, oh, who's this person? Well, who inspired them, or who inspired them? Where did their influences come from? Where did this thing come from? Where did these toys come from? What spawned it? That kind of thing. And the more you get into it, there's so many interesting little details that come up as you dive deeper into whatever you're interested in.
Exactly. I mean, it's when people say they read comic books, like, to know the history or the origin of a character, you can't start at issue number 300.
Yeah.
You have to go back to issue number 1 to find out how this guy became this guy, how he got his superpowers, how, you know, certain things, and then start there. Like, you can't say you're into hip hop and then start in 1995 and then go forward. No, you have to go back to 1985 to 1975 to be like, okay, how did this all come into play? So it's that lineage of the culture, and it's that lineage that the Japanese do so well. You know, you have to, like, Quentin Tarantino is a historian of film.
Yeah.
You know, and he has his particular style of films that he loves, but he's a historian of film, and he knows the culture and knows history of directors and films and actors, and that's so important. And for me, at the end of the day, that's what it is for me. It's all about lineage. It's all about history. It's all about culture. It's all about connecting the dots to what makes me what I am, and the culture that I love so much, what it is.
I think that's a perfect spot to end things. Great message. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much, Skeme, for just sharing your thoughts. And you've always been a big inspiration to me personally. And I hope that everyone listening or watching, you know, got something out of this. And yeah.
Yo, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, man. When you reached out, I was like, oh man, great. Like, because I honestly enjoy talking to people who just want to have a conversation on something.
Yeah.
Like that's always fueled my traveling. When I travel places, I'm like, I just want to talk to people. Like, it's not even about coming here and DJing and making money. It's like, yo, let me see who's out there, who's building, who's doing something dope out there. Because I want to feed off that energy and have conversations with people and know what makes other people tick. You know, so when you reached out, I was like, oh yeah, bet. Like, yeah, we can talk, because I know you've got some history and some knowledge, and you're like, you know, it's just so dope to connect with good humans around the world, because good humans are becoming less and less, you know. So it's just so good to connect with good humans on just like multiple levels, man. Because the 3 things that bring us together are food, culture, and music. Like, those are the 3 things that bring the world together: food, music, culture. Because we all love good food, we all have our own cultures, and, you know, music, we all dance to the same beat, you know. So those things connect us, man.
I would add, just human to human connection, and maybe that comes into like culture too, but
the human to human connection, that's
and
so
like
important.
Like that's a big part of just why, like, if we're thinking about breaking or anything, like, again, I've mentioned it with pro wrestling, I mentioned it with games, and even just like with, say, the advent of like streaming and stuff like that. It's like people want to connect with other people. They want to find this common ground, and you know, with the pandemic, we saw it. Like, people were isolated and stuff like that, like staying at home, not seeing anybody, and people went nuts.
You know?
And
that right there, when I saw people starting to lose their mind, I was like, okay, go take a walk in a park, like chill out. Like, the crazy thing is, we have technology, so we can stay connected to people in a sense. There's nothing beats sitting in a bar with someone and talking to them. But imagine if we did not have technology. Imagine if we only had to email or write a letter and put it in the mail to someone. We're better off than people. Like, people were really losing their mind. But that also told me a couple of things. One, during the pandemic was where people should have picked up a new hobby or read a book or got some knowledge of something during it, because you had more than enough time. Like, I did so much, yet I feel like I didn't do enough, because what I should have been doing was getting my Japanese language up. That's what I should have been doing, right? But I did so many other things. Like, I feel like if people didn't read a book, gain some knowledge on something, become a semi-expert on something, they wasted a lot of time. Something should have done something. You know, so yeah, people were losing their minds. They were losing their mind. But I'm like, we have technology. We could stay connected. If you had to put a stamp on an envelope and write a letter to someone, imagine, you know, we've got TV, we've got internet, we've got all this access.
Yeah.
There's no reason to really lose your mind.
Yeah.
Like that. But people were losing. I was like, take a walk in the park.
Yeah.
You know, do some Tai Chi, relax.
Yeah. Well, that's like, that's leading into other territory of like, what is true connection? This kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. And maybe down the road, if we can get you back, you know,
I'm
we
here.
can get into that stuff.
I'm here. Yeah, we could definitely connect on that, because that's a whole nother topic right there. But it's true though. Like, that's true connection. Like, that's true connection. That's sitting back and meditating and like understanding, like, okay, you know what? It'll be all right. Let me take 10 minutes and let me sit here and meditate, or let me do Tai Chi. Let me just really release any stress or problems, or just shut your brain off and just cut the world out for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's important. That's important to your health, to your sanity, you know? So your spirituality, like that's important.
Yeah, well, everyone's got their own kind of form of meditation. And that's like part of the reason why this podcast got even started to begin with, was I was kind of lonely in Japan and I wanted to reconnect with people, even if it's just like, I don't know, even if there's no like useful, quote unquote, useful tidbits of information. It's just having a connection, trying to rekindle like a genuine connection with someone. And that's what a good conversation is like just connecting with people. You're not even, it's like meditation, but you're talking, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and just think, we haven't seen or talked to each other in years, but we came into, and it wasn't even like we were strangers.
Yeah.
The conversation just rolled, you know, like that's when you know it's a good conversation and good connection, because you cannot see someone for years and then the conversation just rolls right into it. You know, so that's important. Like, that connection, man, that human connection is so important. So like, I thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, because anytime I can get to talk to other good humans and just have conversations with them, I'm always for it. So whenever you need me, I'm here.
Well, I appreciate that. And thanks again for just sharing your thoughts and stuff. You've always been a big influence, and you helped shape a lot of the ways that I think about dance, culture, just everything. Yeah. So,
I appreciate it, man. I'm happy I could do that, man. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. Is there any places that if people want to follow you or find some stuff that you're doing, is there any places that they can go to?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, nostalgiaking.com. I do a lot of record reviews and just like cultural things on there. My streaming app, nerve.fm/Skeme Richards. You can find over 140 mixes that I do. I do mixes every week, record reviews and, daily record picks, and Instagram, Skeme Richards. So those are my 3 ways to get a hold of me, and, and just see what's going on in my world, and, everything. It's always culturally what's going on, music, art, culture. It's just, it's who I am. It's everything that you need to know about me in those 3 spots.
Cool. Yeah. Check it out. Thanks again, Skeme, and we'll catch everybody later. Peace.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now really vibe.